1, 2. Everybody good? Everybody sounding good? Something white? What the white balance with? Let's see. White piece of paper. Somebody has it. Okay, the cup is good. It's a white piece of paper down here too. You got it? Anybody else white balancing? Everybody good? Cheers. Here's a piece of paper if you rather that. Good on it? Good on it, good on it. All right. All right, that's everybody good on the white balance? All right.
Everybody ready?
Everybody ready to go? All right, everybody. All right. Again, if anybody needs to ask a question, just raise your hand. We'll hold the microphone back here behind you and we'll pass it to you to ask a question. Y'all got that?
All right, 2-minute warning. They'll be out in 2 minutes.
Hello, everyone. I'm Christy Shane, Director of Communications for the South Carolina Department of Corrections. That's CHRYSTISHAIN. Is everybody good? The capital punishment sentence for Richard Bernard Moore was carried out tonight pursuant to the order of the South Carolina Supreme Court and in accordance with state law. The execution began at 6:01 p.m. and he was pronounced dead by a physician at 6:24 p.m. Mr. Moore was sentenced to death for killing 42-year-old James Mahoney on September 16, 1999, as Mahoney worked at a Spartanburg convenience store. Moore's last statement was read by his attorney, and it is as follows. To the family of Mr. James Mahoney, I am deeply sorry for the pain and sorrow I caused you all. To my children and granddaughters, I love you and I am so proud of you. Thank you for the joy you have brought to my life. To all of my family and friends, new and old, thank you for your love and support. Witnesses to the execution included 2 members of the Mahoney family, the Spartanburg solicitor, Moore's spiritual advisor, and his attorney. Other witnesses included 3 members of the news media who will address you now. After all 3 speak, they will answer questions from the podium. They will not be available for interviews after the news conference is finished. They have their own stories to write. So please ask any questions you have while we are up here. First, Jeffrey Collins from the Associated Press.
Yes, my name is Jeffrey Collins. I'm with the Associated Press. That's JEFFREYCOLLINS. And let me say from the outset, this is the 9th execution I've covered. 8 of them were lethal injections. This one went slightly differently, not from the aspect of what actually happened, just from when we got into the room. When we got into the room, the curtain was already open. Mr. Moore was already on the gurney, as he typically is. The last statement had already been read. And so we sat down. The clock on the wall was like 5:59, about 53 seconds. So everything happened much quicker than it typically does. So that threw me a little bit off as trying to get things together. But let me just lay out what I saw from my perspective over the 24 minutes. So we get in, we sat down. At 6:01, there was, a prison employee said that the execution is set to begin. There were, within like 45 seconds, maybe a minute, Mr. Moore took several deep breaths, almost sounded like snores. At the time, he had his eyes closed. The whole time we were in there, his head was pointed towards the ceiling. If his eyes had been open, they'd have been looking at the ceiling. He did not appear to say anything. He didn't appear to make any movement at all. His arm is strapped. The one arm we can see, which is his left arm, is strapped to the gurney. There are straps that come over his shoulders, too, that are holding him down. So he has those 3 or 4 deep, kind of almost snoring sounding breaths about 45 seconds to a minute after the announcement that the execution can start. At that point, there's then several other shallow breaths that look like they're getting slower and slower until about 6:04. And at that point, I did not see his chest move up or down anymore. And there were 5 people in front of us that were the witnesses that Christy mentioned. There were 2 members of Mahoney's family, the victim's family. Barry Barnett, the solicitor from the Spartanburg area, who was an assistant solicitor at the time that Moore was tried. And then there was a spiritual advisor for Mr. Moore, and there was Lindsey Vaughn, who's Mr. Moore's attorney. When the announcement was made that the execution could begin, Lindsey Vaughn cried. She had a couple of, I don't want to say she sobbed, but she certainly was crying. You could definitely tell she was crying. She was clutching a prayer bracelet of some sort with a cross on it in her hand. The spiritual advisor was sitting with his hands on his knees and his palms up when I guess during those few minutes that you could say the execution was starting. The families of the victim and the family members of the victim and the solicitor, they watched very stoically. I didn't see any reaction from them at all. So once the breathing appeared to stop, there was, as you can tell from the timeline, about almost 20 minutes. I wrote down it was right before the clock turned 6:23 that a doctor came in, or some medical professional had a stethoscope. They listened to various places on Mr. Moore's chest for about 30 to 45 seconds, and then another prison employee declared that Mr. Moore was dead at 6:24. During that time frame, that 18 minutes, I guess, or so between the session of breathing and the time the doctor came in, Lindsey Vaughn would occasionally cry a little bit, but there was very little reaction, no noise in the room except for occasionally someone would clear their throat. Just everyone sitting and looking at the execution chamber in front of them.
Hi, I'm Brooklyn Crow with Fox Carolina News. So, as Jeffrey mentioned, we walked in at 5:59, so the last statement had already been read. We immediately sat down, and I observed there's brick walls basically surrounding us. Besides, in front of us, a large panel of window where you can see Mr. Moore lying there on the gurney. On the left, in front of me, 2 witnesses from the Mahoney family. In the middle was Solicitor Barnett, and then the spiritual advisor and the attorney of Mr. Moore. At 6:01, one of the prison officials said permission granted to receive the execution drug. That was administered. We could not see that actually being administered because that's administered from a separate room. There's a hole in the wall with the cords coming out, so we could see on the left arm where the IV had already been started. About 30 or 45 seconds after that permission granted, I have 6:02. I heard heavy breathing. He took 5 or 6 deep, heavy, loud breaths, and I did not see or hear very much else from him after that. 6:02, breathing started slowing down, very shallow breaths, and at 6:04, I wrote down that he was no longer breathing. And during this time, it was inside this room a very somber type feel. No one said anything. It's completely quiet. His attorney, Mr. Moore's attorney, very emotional. I think that she cried almost throughout the entire 20 or so minutes that we were in there. She was holding a cross in her hand. Moore's spiritual advisor reached over and was holding her hand for most of the time that we were in there. For about 20 minutes, from about 6:04 to around 6:23, we were sitting there not seeing very much with him. Like I said, he had already stopped breathing from what we saw. At that point, a doctor came in right before 6:23. He checked for a heartbeat and for about 30 or 45 seconds, and then after that, he walked back into another room, and then we were told over the speaker that the case of the state versus Richard Moore is now complete, and just seconds later they closed the curtains and we were escorted out. Yes, it's BrookleY, and then my last name is Cromer, Cromer, Fox, Carolina News.
Hi, I'm Joseph Bustos with the state newspaper. That's Joseph. Bustos is B like boy, US, T like Tom, OS. I'll reiterate what Jeffrey and Brookley have already relayed to you all. I will say the snores sounded like sleep apnea sounds, with someone that has sleep apnea. For one of the things I noticed when the spiritual advisor was holding Lindsey Von's hand was for about 17 minutes, where we're just waiting for the process to take place. Mr. Moore was wearing glasses. He did have a gray beard, so some of the photos are of him. He's very much younger. That's some of the stuff that we noticed. And when we walked in, we saw the blanket up to his chest. His left arm was outstretched with the IV in, and we saw the IV going into a hole in the wall. It looked like there were two transparent tubes going into the wall, probably one in each arm, but we're not sure. And then there was what looked like an electrical cord that was connected to that was coming out of the wall towards Mr. Moore.
And go ahead. Any questions? Fire away. Oh, okay.
Just for any of y'all, and if not, maybe for Christy, if you're taking questions. Again, still working? Wonderful. For any of y'all or for Christy, if she's taking questions, were you given an explanation of why you were not in the room when the statement was read?
Yes, we were. There was a miscommunication on the team, and someone jumped the gun. And before the witnesses were all seated.
And then I guess while I have the mic here for Jeffrey, since, as you mentioned, this is your 9th execution witnessing, besides that, as far as the timeline goes, was anything really different compared to last time with Freddie Owens or the previous executions?
The key difference between, and I'll make the comparison first between the last Freddie Owens and this one, because those are the two that used the one drug, the pentobarbital. It seemed like there was a shorter period of time for Moore to stop breathing, but there was a longer period of time between when the doctor or the medical professional came in to put the stethoscope on the chest and actually declare Mr. Moore dead. Compared to other ones, I think, the state used to use 3 drugs, and those seemed to go by a little bit quicker. The breathing tended to stop a little quicker during the 3-drug protocol than this one. But as far as the actual execution itself, there was no outward pain. You couldn't see whether anybody was discomfort or pain. There was no outward signs of anything like that. It was a very, I always hate to use the word peaceful on these things, but there was no obvious signs of discomfort.
Questions?
Hi, thanks for this. I was just hoping can you walk through the timeline again from his first snores started? You said the snoring, gasping breaths at about 2 minutes, and was his eyes open at this time or his eyes closed?
From the time we came in and the curtain was already open, his eyes were shut, and if they were open, he would have been looking at the ceiling. He was like laying on his back straight up. And so his eyes didn't open at any time.
And he did not appear to look over and acknowledge anyone in the room?
No, but again, this was after his last statement was read, and typically, if I see any kind of interaction with people or that are witnesses, it's typically during that time, right after the curtain opens, before the final words are read. I mean, I couldn't tell you each one of them, but most of the time, once executions start, most of the condemned inmates tend to kind of look up and just not, at that point, they just kind of look away from the people that are there.
And one last question: was there any interaction between the members of Mahoney's family with each other or with Solicitor Barnett?
No, they were very stoic. I think they all, one of them cleared his throat occasionally, but that was the only thing that you would have seen that was any reaction at all. I mean, they were both the family members and the solicitor were looking at what was going on and showed, if any emotion, very little at all.
I understand. Thank you.
We had one over there and then one back there.
Hi. This question is for Ms. Shane. Do we know what was Mr. Moore's last meal?
We do. Several of you have asked about Moore's last meal. It was a steak cooked medium, fried catfish and shrimp, scalloped potatoes, green peas, broccoli with cheese, sweet potato pie, German chocolate cake, and grape juice.
And one more question. Do we know which members of Mahoney's family was in attendance for the execution?
I do not.
And I can't say either with any certainty. I can tell you Barry Barnett was there because I know Mr. Barnett, and I've dealt with him in my journalistic capability before. But no, I don't know exactly which members of Mr. Mahoney's family were there.
I want to elaborate on that just for a minute, Terry. I don't believe we should release the names of victim witnesses, and that's been a practice that we have. So, I mean, we obviously know who they are, but we're not going to be releasing their identity. If they want to speak, they have the opportunity to do so, and we make sure they understand how that happens.
I will mention one other thing that Joe mentioned about that Mr. Moore did look a little different than the pictures we've seen. His beard was kind of like mine. Long beard. It was a very short, close cropped beard, and he had glasses that you don't typically see on him as well. So he did look a little bit different than he looks in the photographs that we've seen. Yeah.
Any other questions?
You had mentioned some of the witnesses. What were the total number of witnesses in the room, and sort of what groups were represented? You had mentioned the family, members.
The Mahoney family, the Spartanburg solicitor, Mr. Moore's spiritual advisor, Mr. Moore's lawyer, 3 members of the press, myself, and an officer. Any other questions? The press building will be open until 8 o'clock. Please give these journalists time to do their work, and if you need me, I will be here. Thank you very much.